Get ready before life happens. The podcast helping you navigate life's what ifs.
Welcome to Get Ready Before Life Happens. I'm your host, Tony Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Deborah Goldstein, philanthropic advisor and founder of Enlightened Philanthropy. Deborah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Tony. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, excited for the conversation. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your origin story and how did it lead you to launching Enlightened Philanthropy?
I love this idea of an origin story. My son's at that age where he's really into superheroes. So there's always talk of origin stories. So I love that phrasing. I have realized over the years that my origin story started much earlier than I ever gave it credit for. And it really started when I was young and growing up and watching my parents be involved with organizations that they were passionate about. My dad served on many boards. My parents also created a chapter of the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation here in Portland. It now has gone through several name changes since then. But it was always sort of in the ethos. I mean, even my grandparents were volunteers. Both my grandmothers were volunteers. And so that needs to be recognized as part of that origin story. So it's not, it now no longer surprises me that I ended up in the world of fundraising, particularly as a grant writer. And in my work, as a grant writer, I met a lot of families who had family foundations, and I got a chance to talk with them. And I got to see the difference between, family A, who was giving to a huge list of organizations, and there didn't seem to be much rhyme or reason to it. And then family B, who had one focused area that they were giving to, and they were really sort of all in on that focus area. That was where they spent their time outside of work, getting to know the issues, getting to know the stakeholders, getting to know the organizations. Their issue area was marine conservation. And in fact, they would even go, diving around the world on their vacations. So they knew the environment intimately. And I thought, there's something there. There's something in, family B and how they relate to their giving and think about their giving that's different from family A. And how could I potentially move a family from point A to point B if that is something that they're interested in thinking more about more impact, more intentionally about their giving, and really narrowing in their focus. And that then became the origin of Enlightened Philanthropy. Before I even knew there was such a thing as a philanthropic advisor, even, I just had this sense that there were families that could use my support.
Well, that's awesome. And I think that is a growing field is thinking about giving with impact. We're seeing people investing with their values. I mean, would you say that's what giving with impact is aligning your philanthropy with your values and who you are?
Very much so. I mean, that's where I start with all of the people that I work with, whether it be individually or families or in philanthropy camp for women, is with values. Because in order to give an alignment with who you are and what you value, is really a way to have a win-win for both yourself and for your community or the cause that you're choosing to have an impact on and make a difference with. It's
That's
just
awesome.
much more rewarding all around.
Yeah, and I think it's exactly as you said, it's rewarding, but it's also not quite immersive. That's not the right word, but when you're talking about family B, is it is something where they're really making a difference because they understand the issues and they're tied into the issues.
Exactly. And there's just there's a deepened commitment there, really, I think, to really to get below the surface of what's going on and have more than just a cursory knowledge of what an organization is doing or what a field needs in terms of growth. And that makes a different kind of impact.
Definitely, definitely. So let's back up for a minute. Can you share what a family foundation is for people who aren't familiar with the term?
Sure. So a family foundation is a foundation run by a family. Foundations have a typical tax status within the, IRS framework, and there's particular um, guidelines that go along with that in terms of spend out, in terms of what money can be used for, what it can't be used for. And that is one of the structures that is used in the world of philanthropy. And then, so from the nonprofit side where I was working, I was typically writing grant proposals to make requests to those family foundations for a grant for whatever organization I was working for.
Fantastic. And I think, for people watching and listening, is family foundations are one way that you can set up your philanthropic endeavors, which is brings me to the next question of what is a philanthropic advisor and how can philanthropic advisors help people shape the direction of their philanthropy?
Sure, sure. And I do just want to also, before I answer that, I'll also touch on there is also a new and growing other structure called a donor advised fund. So I just want to like paint a little bit of a bigger picture there. And that has really been growing in people's use and is a little bit easier. There's not as many restrictions around it as there are with a family foundation. And so just if people are considering, those are usually two of the main options. There are others, but those are sort of two of the main, a family foundation and a donor advised fund, which you could set up at your local community foundation. You could set up through places like Schwab and Fidelity. And like I said, they have different guidelines associated with a donor advised fund. And all of this to the point of a philanthropic advisor, our role is really to support families in making those decisions. My particular focus as a philanthropic advisor is to help families align their giving with their values, like I said, and really gain the clarity that they need around how they're going to give, the courage to give in the way that they want to give. And and so those are sort of two of the big, like I heard somebody talk about my work recently, and it's always fun to hear others describe what you do, and somebody really talked about how a lot of my focus was around purpose, which I would agree with. That's true. It's around the purpose of a family's giving or an individual's giving and what does that mean to them. But the field is rather broad and diverse, and so some people are working more with family foundations. Some people are working um, more with ultra high net worth clients. Some work more in the area of giving circles. So there's sort of variety in who we are and what we offer and what we do with our clients.
Well, that's awesome. And I think, one thing just to back up to a DAF is for people to know is that you don't have to have a lot of money to start a donor advised fund.
Right.
Where I think sometimes with a family foundation, it's much more of an endeavor. It's traditionally been wealthier people, but with a donor advised fund, it opens a door to pretty much anybody who has philanthropic intent.
Exactly, exactly. That's one of the nice things about the donor advised fund, and I think that's why they've been increasing in popularity and use.
Yeah, so and they're a great tool. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of financial institutions that offer them. There's also what you refer to as community foundation. So pretty much, I think every relatively decent sized city in the United States has a community foundation. So, you can reach out to your community foundation for more information. They'll guide you through all the different ways that you can engage with them. So I love that you bring that up. And I think, for people with this is, that you can have a strategy with your giving. So having access to somebody like yourself helps people develop that strategy because that goes back to what you were saying with family A and family B is you can give money to charity and to nonprofits without a strategy, but you don't bring the same, it doesn't feel the same. And I think that's
Exactly.
important.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I discuss with the people I work with is I often ask, what is the most meaningful gift you've ever given? Because that can really get to what was meaningful about it. Was it something you did? Was it something the organization did? Was it something that your gift did? And then I also asked about the flip side of that. Like, have you given a gift that maybe didn't feel good or something went wrong? And just to sort of have those to compare and contrast and how that feels, because it really does feel differently. And people usually can call up an example for each of those. And that really highlights for them, oh, I could be giving more meaningful gifts if I'm focused on where I want to give as opposed to something else that maybe isn't as important to me.
Yeah, I love that. Although my pet peeve is you give an annual fund and then you receive like a mailer every week, just like asking for more money. And it's like, holy cow, I only gave $25 and you're spending it all on postage and printing.
Right, right, right.
It's like,
You're not alone in that, Tony. You're not alone. And so we also talk about um at least in Philanthropy Camp for Women, we talk about what are some of your rights as a donor? How do you get off lists like that? And it's a good thing that I have the experience from being on the fundraising side of things that I know that these are things that you can ask for.
yeah, and there is a donor bill of rights, at least that I've seen in
Yes.
the planned giving world. So
Yes, exactly.
For people watching and listening, I will share a link to the Donor Bill of Rights because, as you point out, it's your money. You're the donor. You're making the call, so you have certain rights, and
Yes.
you don't have to give to an organization like I mentioned. Is I see that as a waste of money if I give money to an organization and all of a sudden it triggers 100 letters. It's like, okay, they're not using my money efficiently. And to
Right.
me, I mean, I understand how it works from a larger perspective, but at the same time, for me, it's like I'd rather spend it on an organization that's putting the money into programs.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. Exactly. You're, like I said, you're not alone. Many people feel that way.
yeah, and I know. So anyway, we don't need to go into that strategy. So since you brought up Philanthropy Camp for Women, tell us a little bit more about that. What is Philanthropy Camp for Women?
Sure. So this is a signature program that I created for women to come together in small groups. And we meet virtually during the spring and the fall for 6 sessions to sort of help them on their journey and really kind of walk through a set of exercises to get them to that place of clarity and courage. And this program really came out of an interaction that I had. I was in a networking group years ago, and I was talking about what it is I do and what I offer. And a woman came up to me and said, "Oh, I really want to be a philanthropist." And then she said, "But I work at a nonprofit, so I don't really have a lot of money. And I donate where I can. And I also volunteer here." She kind of gave me this whole list of things. And it just hit me in that moment that she really didn't think that philanthropy was for her something she could be. And so once she had, given her list of things, I told her, "Hey, you are a philanthropist." And that just was sort of the spark of the idea is I don't want people to feel like they cannot be that the only form of philanthropy is what we see people of ultra high net worth doing, the Mackenzie Scotts of the world, the Bill Gates, the Melinda French Gates. You know, we at any level in our lives can be philanthropists. And so that was the original intent behind Philanthropy Camp. And over time, it's also really that importance of coming together in community has really shown up as I talk with sometimes when I work with individual clients, they feel very isolated. Maybe they came to the wealth that they have later in life, whether it be inheritance or they've sold a business or a business has taken off, and now they have more than enough and they've recognized they have more than enough, but they don't know who to talk to because they are not in a circle where they can really talk about this with their peers. And so Philanthropy Camp provides that opportunity for women to come together, explore their values, explore what they want their legacy to be, create their own mission and vision statement. We also talk about not only giving, but receiving. And how does receiving feel? Because it's important to put yourselves in the shoes of the recipient of a gift and what that might be like for them. We also talk about any money messages that they might have heard when they were growing up and how that impacts their relationship with money. We talk about what's enough, so that they can get a sense of that for themselves and recognize maybe right now they have sort of enough financial resources, but they have more than enough time and they have expertise in a certain area. Okay, well, great. They can give their time and their talent. So it also helps them identify where might they be giving and how might they be giving. And our final session is a small giving circle where they propose organizations that they want to give to, and then they make the decision together. A portion of every participant's fee um, goes toward that. I also then put in the same amount that they do, and we're able to make a gift at the end of camp, which is a really rewarding way to finish our time together.
Well, that's great. So, well, you said so many amazing things in there. I want to walk back to the time and talent. The 60s. Unfortunately, I don't remember all 60s. You probably do. But, it is, your time and talent are very valuable to organizations, especially if you have a specialty. I've served on a few boards. And so boards are always looking for an attorney or somebody with accounting experience or investment experience or, experience across the board.
Right.
So for people watching and listening, it's not just about giving money. There are lots of ways to support nonprofits. So I'm so glad you bring up the talent part of it in time.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's what I go to is the root of philanthropy, which is really love of humankind. And if you approach philanthropy from that standpoint, well, then anyone can give. Someone said to me once, "Well, a person, who's unhoused, they can't give." And I said, "I bet they are extremely generous. They've created their own community on the streets. They're watching out for others. They're, they're giving in their own way. It may not be how you see philanthropy, but they are certainly giving in their own way. So yes, the T's that you mentioned, treasure, of course, which is money, time, which is often volunteering, talent, which is often volunteering, like you said, serving on a board, delivering meals through Meals on Wheels. There's so many ways you could give. Then there's also your ties. So bringing your network to a cause that you care about. We see a lot of this through the fundraisers where it's like a walkathon and you're then fundraising a certain amount from your community, your ties, your network, and really showing, hey, I really care about this cause and I'd like you to support me in this. Um, Testimony is another one, just talking about the organizations that are doing great work that you've had a connection with. And that's easy. We've all been touched by nonprofits, whether it's the college we went to, whether um, it's a hospital maybe somebody in our family needed to go to. Um, we really all have been touched by a nonprofit in some way. And then you mentioned six, and I never remember the sixth one. It's the newest one, so I'm sorry. We'll have to maybe look that up and put it in the notes for folks.
Yeah, so for people watching and listening, I'll have all six T's in there, including the mystery six T that
Yeah.
we can't remember right now. So you definitely don't have to remember them if you're watching and listening. But the concept here is just to understand that there's many different ways to support the nonprofits that you have. Of course, money is great, but these other things, significant ties, can make a huge difference, especially for a smaller nonprofit. Um,
Sure. And
so
also,
the,
Tony, I would just jump in there and say, you know, philanthropy is also, we think a lot about it like an individual to a nonprofit, but it also can be individual to individual. I mean, think about, your neighbor who's sick and you bring them some chicken soup, or they can't shovel their walk in the winter and you shovel it for them, or you mow their lawn, or, just some of those beautifully simple acts of kindness in our circles um, does does also count as an act of philanthropy, and it's just really beautiful to then sort of see a ripple effect when we're helping on a small scale like that as well.
Yeah, well, that's something that I was involved with. So my son has type 1 diabetes, and we had a local parents group called Brave Buddies. And so, all, is we had an email group, which was always super helpful. But the other thing that we all did for each other was we mentored new parents. So parents who had kids who were newly diagnosed, is some parent would you know, stand up and say, hey, my kid's about the same age. Let's get together. We'll talk to you about how to deal with it. And, so it was good for the kids, but it was also good for the parents. And so that was a way that we were able to give. Didn't involve, anything but just a little bit of time. And like you said, it's just opening up a little bit of compassion and, helping somebody out and passing it along. So, it's wonderful that you bring that up because I think so many people get caught up that it's just about the money, but it's not.
Yeah, it really isn't. And I mean, that's exactly the type of group that my parents created here in Portland so many years ago. Also, my brother had type 1 diabetes, and that was so crucial to them, especially decades ago when it was still a relatively, um, grim diagnosis actually at that time. And just to have other people that you knew that had children, it was just so helpful, so helpful.
Definitely, definitely. So, yeah, so want to make sure. So, one of the things you talk about is involving the next generation. Excuse me. Why is it important to involve the next generation in your philanthropic planning?
So one of the things that they've seen in studies that they've done is that it is it's not enough to just talk with your kids about giving. Like that's all well and good. And if you can also model for your kids giving, maybe even give them an opportunity to give with you, that sort of combination of talk and role modeling how to give goes a lot further in creating an environment around giving. And so that can be done in so many different ways. Oftentimes, for little kids, if they get an allowance, you might give them money to both save, share, and spend. And so the share is set aside for them to give to a cause that they care about. And and have them involved in making the choice. And over time, that pot of money may grow. Their choices are going to change depending on their interests. And it really just sort of sets young kids up for an understanding. Also, there's plenty of volunteer opportunities out there for people to get involved. I know usually on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, there is some sort of, at least in our community, there's been opportunities to volunteer on that day. And there's usually something that's definitely family friendly. It's amazing all the different opportunities there are out there. Um, and I think it's also an opportunity for you to talk with your kids about your values and what's important to you. And if being a, giving member of society is important to you, this is a great way to illustrate that. And then, of course, as time moves on and depending on whatever structures you and your family may have, you may want to do something different at different ages. And I've worked with, everything from elementary school age kids to kids and their families and their, adult children in their late 30s, early 40s, helping them become part of their family's giving. And it's always just really exciting to see how the kids choose to take that on and sort of evolve what the family has been doing as well.
Yeah, I love that as we got our son obviously involved with the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, um, which is now Breakthrough T1D. And he donated some money, he donated time in creating a walk team, but he was very involved. And in fact, he even did his high school internship with them.
Mm.
So he gave in many different ways, and he felt like he had benefited so much from the organization that he wanted to give back. And I think that's hopefully something that, as you point out, he'll carry with him throughout his life. Of course, I was laughing because I'm thinking I like to support the Girl Scouts of America, in my cookies.
There you go. Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody watching and listening, this
Yeah.
is your permission to go out there and get a box of Girl Scout cookies. It does go to a good organization and you get some great cookies at the same time. So,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Enjoy, enjoy. I mean, that's the great thing is there's so many different, like I said, there's so many different options of what you can do. In fact, this recent Martin Luther King Jr. Day, my son's school put on, the hosted, and I want to say there were probably 10 to 15 different opportunities for them to create something. And we had just moved into a new home, and one of the opportunities was to create welcome home signs for um, a shelter in our area that takes in families and helps them move to an actual home off the streets and into a home for themselves. And so I mentioned to my son, I said, hey, wouldn't this be nice to sort of take what we're feeling about our new home and setting up our new place and transfer that into a sign for others? very simple, but also just really can make the difference and make something feel um, special for others too, which is great.
Yeah, and it gets your son involved. So Deborah, to wrap up, I have what I call the Get Ready Hot Take Trio. These are three quick questions I ask all of my guests,
Okay.
more rapid fire in nature.
Okay.
The first one is, what is one philanthropy myth you're trying to break?
Ooh, I think it's that philanthropy is not just for ultra folks of ultra high net worth. Anybody can be a philanthropist.
Yeah, I love that, and we've highlighted that through the show, so I hope that helps everybody feel like, hey, you can do this, you can support the organizations in your life that are making a difference in it align with your values.
Absolutely.
So Deborah, let's get out the time machine for a minute. If you could go back in time, knowing what you know now about philanthropy, what advice would you give your younger self?
Ooh, I think it's I think it's to not be so rigid in where I'm choosing to give. And by that, I mean there have been times when I've been asked by family or friends to give to something, and it hasn't been in alignment with things that I would give to. And yet I recognized that it's really important to support what others are interested in. I mean, we all get asked by friends and family to support one thing or another. And so I've just found that there's a nominal amount that I'd be willing to give to those organizations. And that's part, so much of our giving can be proactive, and there are always going to be these times when we might be asked by somebody close to us and we're going to be a little bit more reactive. And so to also set aside some funds for those gifts and be open to giving and supporting that relationship and what that person cares about with their philanthropy.
I think that's a great suggestion, because it does mean a lot to your loved ones, to support the organizations if they're doing like a charity ride or whatever it is, or book drive, whatever it is to go out there and show your support and your love in a different way. And you
Absolutely.
don't, like you said, is you don't have to give thousands of dollars, just a $25 gift makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So to wrap up, the last question is, what's your number one tip to change the way we think about philanthropy?
Hmm. I think you know, philanthropy is an opportunity for us to create the world that we want to live in. And um, if we could go about it with that lens of, what is the difference that we want to see? What is the problem we want to help be the solution to? What is the area where we want to have an impact on? Um, that can really help shape how we choose to give.
I love that. Philanthropy is an opportunity to create the world we want to live in. I think that is so powerful and an excellent way to close the show. So that we have our mic drop moment. So thank you
Great.
for that. So Deborah, where can people learn more about you, Enlightened Philanthropy and Philanthropy Camp for Women?
Sure. The best place to go is my website, enlightenedphilanthropy.com. You can find out about all my different services there. And you can also learn more about Philanthropy Camp for Women. And if you sign up for my newsletter, then you'll get the latest about dates for camp.
Awesome, awesome. And for everybody watching and listening, if you have access to the show notes, there will be links to all these things so you can get in touch with Deborah and learn more about Enlightened Philanthropy and Philanthropy Camp for Women. So, Deborah, thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
It's been my pleasure talking with you, Tony. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning in to this episode of Get Ready Before Life Happens. If you learned something today to change the way you think about philanthropy, please be sure to subscribe and to share this episode with a friend. You can also go to my website at tonystewart.com to join the Get Ready movement. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.